The rain comes down in sheets, turning the jungle floor into a slick, sucking mud that grabs at our boots like it wants to keep us here forever. I'm standing on a small rise in the middle of the Kualau Mountains on Oahu, the heart of the Lightning Academy's training area, watching a new class of soldiers struggle through a patrol. They're soaked through, ruck sagging, faces smeared with dirt and exhaustion. As a sergeant and cadre instructor for the Jungle Operations training course, I call out corrections. Quiet, precise, no yelling. Slow down. Feel the ground before you step. The jungle doesn't care how fast you want to go. I feel that familiar mix surging through me, power and responsibility. Power because I know exactly how to break them down and build them back up, how to push them to the edge without sending them over. Responsibility because one wrong call, one overlooked detail, and someone could get seriously hurt or worse. These kids trust me with their lives in this green hell, and I take that dead serious. But as I watch them, I see ghosts. That kid in the back, slipping on a root and cursing under his breath, that was me years ago. Wide-eyed, cocky, thinking I was tough because I had run a few marathons back home. I remember the humidity hitting like a wall, the way the vines seem to reach out and snag your weapon, the constant wet that never let up. I was a private then, fresh out of basic, slotted into the 25th Infantry Division, Tropic Lightning, and voluntold for JOTC because someone thought I needed seasoning. Standing here now, in the same rainforest that almost broke me, I realize this whole story is a confession. I wasn't always this calm, collected instructor. I was weak once. I cried in the dark. I almost quit. And the jungle didn't care. It just kept coming, relentless, until I either adapted or got spit out. That's why I'm writing this. Not for glory or some war story bullshit, but because every time a new class shows up, wide-eyed at the edge of the East Range Training Complex, I see my old self in them. And I need to confess, the man who stands in front of them now, the one they call Sergeant with a mix of fear and respect, was forged in the same fire they're about to walk through. This is the story of how a scared kid from the mainland became the guy who sends others into the green, knowing exactly how much it hurts and why it's worth it. Everyone back home thinks Hawaii is heaven on earth. Postcards show turquoise water, perfect waves, palm trees swaying over white sand beaches. Tourists fly in, rent convertibles, sip Mai Tais at sunset, and post filtered photos with captions like, "Living the Dream." They hike to waterfalls, snorkel with sea turtles, and complain only when the Wi-Fi at the resort is slow. They never see the places we go. The Jungle Operations Training Course is held deep in the Ko'olau and Waianae mountain ranges, places the tour buses don't reach. Here, the rainforest is thick, dark, and alive in a way that feels almost hostile. The canopy blocks most of the sunlight, so even at noon it feels like perpetual dusk. The air is so saturated with moisture that breathing feels like inhaling soup. Your uniform never dries. It just goes from soaked to damp and back again. Mold grows on everything, boots, rucksacks, the inside of your weapon if you don't fight it every single day. The ground doesn't forgive mistakes. One wrong step and you're sliding down a muddy slope into a ravine full of wait-a-minute vines that tear at your skin and snag your gear. Feral pigs crash through the underbrush at night, sounding like an enemy patrol. Mosquitoes and centipedes the size of your finger find every exposed inch of skin. Leeches drop from leaves and burrow in before you feel them. And the rain, God, the rain, comes sideways, sudden and violent, turning trails into streams and streams into flash floods. To outsiders, Hawaii is escape. To us, it's confrontation. The jungle doesn't care about your rank, your toughness, or how many push-ups you can do. It strips away every illusion. It swallows noise, swallows light, swallows confidence. You feel small here, and the jungle wants you to know it. I learned early that the real enemy in JOTC isn't the opposing force in the exercises. It's the terrain itself. It tests whether you can move quietly, stay oriented, keep your gear functioning, And most important, keep your head when everything around you is designed to make you lose it. That's the axis this whole story turns on, the jungle as the ultimate equalizer. It broke me once, it forced me to rebuild, and now I bring others here on purpose, knowing exactly what it will do to them. Because paradise, seen from the inside of a soaked rucksack at O2 with 10 clicks still to go, looks a lot like hell. And sometimes hell is exactly where soldiers are forged. Here's the truth I don't say out loud when I'm standing in front of a new class. I was never the strongest, the fastest, or the toughest. I was just a regular guy from the Midwest who thought the Army would pay for college and maybe give me some stories to tell. I showed up to Schofield Barracks cocky because I could run a sub-40-minute 5-mile and bench my body weight. I thought that would matter here. It didn't. Within the first week of jungle school, the Rainforest exposed every crack in that facade. I was slow on the hills, clumsy with a machete, and terrible at reading the terrain. My ruck felt heavier than everyone else's, my boots blistered faster, and worst of all, I complained. Quietly at first, then louder in my head, then out loud to whoever would listen. I told myself I didn't belong here, that this course was insane, that real soldiers didn't need to play Rambo in some godforsaken jungle on a tropical island. There were nights I lay in my hooch, soaked, shivering even though the air was warm, listening to the rain hammer the poncho overhead, and I seriously considered ringing the bell. You know the one, the surrender bell they keep at the cadre tent. Walk up, ring it 3 times, and you're out. Truck ride back to the barracks, hot shower, dry bed, no more leeches. It sounded like mercy. I never rang it, not because I was brave, but because I was more afraid of going home a quitter than I was of staying. That's not noble, that's just fear wearing a different mask. So here's my first confession. Everything I demand from these soldiers now, silence on the move, attention to detail, refusing to quit when every cell in your body screams for relief, I once failed at miserably. I was the weak link more than once. I was the guy who slowed the patrol, who forgot to camo his shiny gear, who let exhaustion turn into carelessness. I pushed them so hard because I know exactly how fragile resolve can be. I've felt it crack inside me. And I know that if no one had pushed me past that breaking point, if the cadre back then had gone easy, if the jungle had let up even a little, I might have quit. And if I'd quit, I wouldn't be standing here today. The central question of this whole story is simple. How does a weak, scared, complaining private become the sergeant who willingly puts others through the same suffering? Was I forged or just lucky? Did the jungle make me stronger, or did it just weed out the parts of me that couldn't survive? I still don't have a clean answer. But watching these new faces struggle through the mud I once crawled through, I know one thing for sure. I owe them the truth about where I came from. Because if they think I was born this way, calm, competent, unbreakable, they'll hate themselves for not measuring up. They need to know I was them, and that the only difference between the kid who almost quit and the man teaching them now is that I stayed one more day, then one more, until staying became who I was. We stepped off the bus at the East Range Training Complex just after dawn, a ragged line of 32 soldiers clutching orders that all read the same. Jungle Operations Training Course, 25th ID. The air smelled like wet earth and aviation fuel from the nearby helipad. Cadre and starched jungle fatigues and boonie hats were already waiting, arms crossed, faces blank. The first thing they did was take our names. Not literally, they still used last names, but everything that made us individuals disappeared in the first hour. We lined up on a gravel parade square while a master sergeant with a voice like gravel walked the ranks with electric clippers. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Hair rained onto our boots. The kid next to me, a surfer from California who'd shown up with a man bun, stared at the pile of blonde strands on the ground like he'd just lost a limb. Then came the gear issue. Same rucks for everyone, same ponchos, same load-bearing equipment, same jungle boots that would blister every foot the same way. They handed us dog tags, but we were already numbers, roster spots, patrol positions, fire team assignments. My civilian identity, college dropout, part-time bartender, guy who thought he was in decent shape, evaporated faster than sweat in the humidity. The clash hit hardest when they made us empty our pockets. Wallet photos, lucky coins, that half pack of smokes I'd hidden, everything went into a Ziploc bag labeled with your name and locked in a footlocker you wouldn't see for weeks. Nothing from the outside world comes into the jungle, the cadre said. It distracts you, and distraction gets people killed. I remember standing there in the chow line that first evening, tray in hand, looking around at 31 other shaved heads in identical uniforms and realizing I couldn't pick myself out in a mirror anymore. The Army had done this on purpose, of course. Strip away the ego, the quirks, the illusions of individuality, and rebuild you as part of something bigger. But knowing the theory didn't make it easier. That night, lying on the top bunk in a canvas tent that already smelled like mildew, I felt the first real panic. Who was I, if not the guy with the long hair and the smart mouth back home? If not the one with plans and playlists and a phone full of contacts? The jungle outside the tent flap was already whispering, bugs droning, rain starting to patter on the canvas, and I understood for the first time that this place wasn't just hard. It was designed to erase you first, then see what grew back in its place. By lights out, I wasn't a person anymore. I was just private roster number 17. And the worst part of me was relieved to stop pretending I was ready for what came next. 32 of us started. Only 19 graduated. From the first morning, the differences between us were obvious, even with shaved heads and identical uniforms. There was Ramirez, a wiry infantry private from East L.A. who moved like he'd been born in the jungle. Quiet feet, quick hands, always scanning. He never complained, never seemed tired. Then there was Kowalski, a big National Guard engineer from Wisconsin, built like a linebacker, loud and confident, cracking jokes during ruck marches until the hills shut him up. Park was the quiet one, a specialist from Seattle who'd re-enlisted after college, always reading field manuals at night with a red lens flashlight. And then there was Hayes, the problem child. Cocky, mouthy, always testing the cadre, convinced the course was stupid and that real war didn't happen in rainforests anymore. I fell somewhere in the middle. Not the strongest, not the weakest. I tried to keep up with Ramirez, laughed at Kowalski's jokes, studied with Park when I could, but Hayes and I clashed early. He called me college boy because I'd mentioned wanting to finish my degree someday. I thought he was reckless. He thought I was soft. Those contrasts set the fault lines for everything that followed. Ramirez became the unofficial leader of the fast movers, the ones who pulled security, cleared routes, and never fell out. Kowalski anchored the heavy loads, carrying extra ammo or water without being asked. Park was the navigator. His land nav scores were perfect from day one. Hayes formed his own little clique of loud complainers who smoked the cadre's patience as fast as they burned energy. The group conflicts started small, a missed hand signal during a patrol, someone forgetting to refill canteens, forcing the whole squad to ration, arguments in the tent at night about whose turn it was to dig the cat hole or clean weapons. But the jungle amplified everything. Exhaustion made temper short. Hunger made fairness feel personal. When Hayes openly mocked Park for double-checking his pace count, "We're not lost, nerd," it split us further. Some sided with Hayes because backing the loud guy felt safer. Others gravitated to Ramirez and Park because competence felt like survival. I watched it all, trying not to pick sides, but I felt the pull. I wanted Ramirez to like me. I didn't want Hayes to target me. And slowly, I started seeing how the jungle wasn't just testing individuals, it was testing whether we could function as a unit despite our differences. By the end of week 1, 3 guys had already quit. One rang the bell after a hypothermia scare during a night river crossing. 2 others got medically dropped for blisters that turned into infections. Their bunks stayed empty. We weren't allowed to talk about them. The faces that remained grew harder, sharper. The ones who disappeared became warnings. The jungle doesn't negotiate. And the rest of us, Ramirez, Kowalski, Park, Hayes, me, and the others were now tied together whether we liked it or not. The real conflict wasn't with the cadre anymore. It was between who we'd been on day 1 and who we would have to become to make it out. Day 4. We were finally leaving the relative safety of the training complex and heading into the Ko'olau for our first real patrol, a 12-kilometer movement to contact, followed by an ambush lane. The cadre briefed us in 0400. Move quietly, maintain interval, conserve water, no talking unless it's mission essential. We nodded like we understood. The jungle hits differently once you're inside it with a full load. The trail started steep, straight up a ridge covered in uluhe ferns that grabbed your ankles and guava trees that dumped water on you every time you brushed a branch. Our rucks weighed 85 to 90 pounds. Weapon, ammo, 3 days' rations, 2 full canteens, poncho, extra socks, machete, the works. Within the first hour, sweat was pouring off us like we'd jumped in a river. The cadre had drilled the basics into us: move slow and deliberate, place each foot carefully, keep noise discipline. Ramirez led point like it was natural. I was third in the file. We practiced jungle walking, rolling the foot from heel to toe, feeling for twigs before committing weight. It worked until the slope got steeper and the mud got deeper. Water discipline was the real killer. The rule was simple: sip, don't guzzle. 1 canteen had to last until the next resupply point. The humidity tricked your body into thinking you weren't thirsty until suddenly you were. I remember watching Kowalski tilt his canteen back too early, taking big gulps. Hayes did the same. I tried to follow the rule, but by kilometer 6, my mouth felt like cotton and my head was pounding. Then came the mistake that cost everyone. Hayes, somewhere in the middle of the file, stepped on a rotten branch hidden under leaves. Crack, like a rifle shot. Birds exploded out of the canopy. The whole patrol froze. Seconds later, the cadre enemy force triggered the ambush early. Claymores, blanks but loud as hell, went off on both flanks. Smoke grenades popped. The instructors in ghillie suits started screaming, "Bang, bang, you're dead," and tagging guys with laser pointers. We failed the lane spectacularly. Half the patrol died in the first 10 seconds because we bunched up. The other half got killed trying to break contact because we couldn't find cover in the thick vegetation fast enough. When it was over, we lay in the mud, chests heaving, while the lead instructor, a quiet staff sergeant named Alvarez, walked the kill zone and pointed out every error. He didn't yell, he just asked questions. Who made the noise that compromised the patrol? Hayes raised his hand, defiant. What did that cost the rest of you? Silence. How much water did you drink before the ambush? Kowalski and Hayes again. Now you're dehydrated and combat ineffective before the fight even started. The punishment was collective. We had to low crawl back to the rally point, 400 meters through waist-deep mud, rucks on our backs. It took hours. Blisters opened, shoulders burned. No one talked. That night, refilling canteens at a trickle of a stream, I realized the jungle's first real lesson. Your individual mistakes don't just hurt you, they hurt everyone. One loud step, one extra gulp of water, and the whole team pays. The Rainforest doesn't care about excuses or who's toughest. It punishes the group for the weakest discipline. We learned to move quieter after that. We learned to sip water like it was gold. And we started watching each other more carefully, not just for safety, because survival here wasn't individual anymore. It was shared. It was the end of week 2. We'd just finished a 20-kilometer night movement through some of the nastiest terrain I've ever seen. Straight down a ridge, across a waist-deep stream 3 times, then back up the other side in pitch black. Rain had been falling steady for 6 hours. My ruck was soaked and felt like it weighed 120 pounds instead of 90. Every step was a negotiation with mud that wanted to steal my boots. We finally hit the objective rally point around 0330, set up a hasted perimeter, and collapsed under poncho hooches in pairs. I was paired with Park. He passed out almost immediately. soft snoring under the sound of rain drumming on nylon. I couldn't sleep. My body was done. Calves cramped so hard I had to bite my poncho liner to keep from groaning. Blisters on both heels had popped hours ago and were now raw meat rubbing against wet socks. My shoulders felt permanently dislocated, but the physical stuff I could have handled. It was the mental collapse that scared me. Lying there in the dark, listening to the jungle breathe around us, drips falling from leaves, something large moving far off in the brush, the constant insect hum, I started doing the math. How many more weeks? How many more nights like this? What was the point? I wasn't some future ranger or special forces guy. I was just a regular infantryman who'd raised my hand for jungle school because my platoon sergeant said it would look good on my NCOER. Now I was paying for that ambition with every ounce of me. The internal argument went full volume. You're not cutting it. Look at Ramirez. He's still alert on security. Kowalski carried the saw ammo and didn't fall out once. Even Hayes, for all his bitching, kept up. You're the weak one. Just ring the bell tomorrow. Tell him you twisted an ankle or something. No one will blame you. Half the class is already gone. You gave it a shot. Go home, sleep in a dry bed, eat real food. Stop pretending you're this hardcore soldier. You're not. I actually pictured it. Walking into the cadre tent at first light, ringing that stupid bell 3 times, handing over my weapon. The truck ride back to Schofield. A hot shower. Pizza. My buddies in the rear asking what happened and me shrugging it off with some half-truth. For the first time in my life, quitting felt like the smart choice, the safe choice, the merciful choice. Tears came then, hot, silent, mixing with the rain on my face. I wasn't crying from pain. I was crying because I could feel my will cracking, and I hated myself for it. I'd always thought I was tougher than this. Turns out I wasn't. Park stirred next to me. In the dim green glow of my watch, I saw him watching me. "You good?" he whispered. I lied. "Yeah, just cold." He was quiet for a minute, then said, "Everybody thinks about it. Doesn't mean you will." I didn't answer, but his words stuck. Everybody, not just me. Dawn came gray and wet, rebelly at 0500. I got up, laced my boots over the bloody socks, shouldered my ruck, and moved out with the patrol. I didn't ring the bell that day, or the next. But that night under the poncho hooch was the closest I ever came. The jungle had found my limit and pushed one step past it. And somehow, on the other side of that darkness, I was still walking. The first time I saw Staff Sergeant Alvarez in action, I hated him. He was the lead cadre for our cycle, mid-30s, lean, dark eyes that missed nothing. While the other instructors barked orders and smoked us for every minor infraction, Alvarez barely raised his voice. He'd just stand there in his faded jungle fatigues, watching a patrol move through the brush, then quietly say, "Stop. Tell me what you just did wrong." And you'd realize you'd made 3 fatal mistakes you didn't even know were mistakes. No yelling, no push-ups in the mud, just cold, precise correction. It was worse than screaming somehow. Yelling you can tune out. That calm voice cut straight through your ego and left you exposed. We called him the ghost behind his back. He'd appear out of nowhere on a lane, materializing from the foliage like he'd grown there. One minute you're congratulating yourself on a clean movement, the next he's 10 feet away asking why your point man's weapon was unsafe during a danger area crossing. Ramirez respected him immediately. Kowalski was terrified of him. Hayes tried to bait him into an argument once, something about how real combat isn't this picky, and Alvarez just looked at him for 5 full seconds, then said, "You're right, real combat is less forgiving." Hayes didn't push it again. Alvarez became the counterweight to every loud, aggressive stereotype of a drill instructor I'd carried from basic training. He didn't need volume because he had absolute competence. He demonstrated technique once, crossing a stream with full gear without making a ripple, or moving uphill so quietly you couldn't hear him 5 meters away, then expect you to match it. No excuses. Years later, when I pinned on Sergeant and came back to Lightning Academy as cadre, I modeled myself after him without even realizing it. I don't yell at my students either. I don't need to. The jungle does the screaming for me. But I also understood something deeper about Alvarez that I didn't back then. His quiet wasn't detachment, it was control. He'd seen soldiers die in training before. Heat stroke, flash floods, falls down ravines. He knew that every time he let a bad habit slide, he was gambling with lives downrange. The calm voice wasn't mercy. It was the sound of someone who refused to let emotion cloud judgment. He wasn't trying to break us for fun. He was trying to keep us alive later, in places far worse than Hawaii. And now, standing in his old spot on the ridgeline, watching a new generation struggle with the same lessons, I finally get it. The instructors who don't yell are often the ones who care the most, because they've already done the math on what happens if you fail.
People think jungle training is about teaching soldiers how to swing machetes, build rafts out of ponchos, or eat bugs if they have to. Those skills matter, but they're secondary. The real curriculum, the one that keeps you breathing in combat, is discipline. Staff Sergeant Alvarez drilled that into us every single day, not with speeches, but with relentless attention to the small things. Gear layout was the first religion. Every morning at 0500, we dumped our rucks on a poncho liner in perfect rows. Weapon at the top, ammo pouches aligned, socks rolled exactly the same way, MREs stacked by menu number. If one item was out of place, the entire squad did flutter kicks in the mud until the offender fixed it. It felt petty until the day we had to evac a guy with heat exhaustion. Everything was so standardized that we found his extra IV bags in seconds. Weapon maintenance was non-negotiable. After every patrol, no matter how tired we were, we cleaned rifles under poncho hooches with red lens flashlights. Alvarez would walk the line, pull a patch through your bore, hold it up to the light. If it came out dirty, you started over. He'd say the same line every time. A dirty weapon doesn't malfunction in training. It malfunctions when your buddy's life depends on it. Water discipline, noise discipline, light discipline, admin discipline, every kind had a purpose. Drink too much too fast, and you're dry when the resupply is delayed. Talk on the move, and you give away your position. Flash a white light at night, and you skyline the whole patrol. Forget to tape down loose straps, and the rattle announces you a kilometer away. Punishments weren't about ego or power trips. They were educational. If someone forgot to camouflage the shiny buckle on their ruck, we all did low crawls until we understood why that reflection could get a sniper's attention. If a fire team leader failed to enforce interval and the patrol bunched up, the whole team carried logs up a ridge until spacing became muscle memory. I hated it then. I get it now. When I came back as cadre, I kept the same system. My students think I'm obsessive when I make them re-roll socks for the third time or repack their ruck because one corner isn't square. They don't see that I'm teaching them a mindset. In the jungle, chaos kills faster than the enemy. Discipline isn't punishment. It's the margin between surviving and not. I've read the after-action reports from real operations in places like Panama, Afghanistan's Karengal, or the Philippine jungles. The units that took preventable casualties almost always trace back to a breakdown in the basics: poor noise discipline on approach, inadequate weapon maintenance leading to stoppages, dehydration turning into heat casualties during a fighting withdrawal. Bullets and bombs get the headlines, but discipline, the quiet, boring, repetitive kind, is what actually brings most soldiers home. That's why I still walk the gear line at night with a red lens, pulling patches through bores. That's why I still smoke an entire squad for one guy's loose 550 cord, because I've seen what happens when you don't. And because Alvarez saved my life long before I ever saw combat, just by refusing to let me be sloppy when it was still safe to learn.
Week 3, Phase 2, the long patrol. 5 days, 4 nights, no resupply except what we carried. 70-pound rucks minimum, live ammo for the final ambush, river crossings, ridge climbs, and a 30-kilometer exfil under simulated pursuit. The cadre called it the gut check. We just called it hell. We were down to 24 students by then. Everyone was leaner, harder, quieter. Even Hayes had stopped mouthing off as much. The jungle had sanded the edges off all of us. The incident happened on day 3. We were moving single file along a narrow ridge trail after a brutal climb. Rain had been falling hard for hours, turning the path into a greasy slide. Kowalski was point man that rotation. Big guy, strong as an ox, but the slope and the weight were wearing him down. I was right behind him in the file. Halfway across a particularly exposed section, Kowalski's foot slipped on a hidden root. He went down hard, twisting his knee with a sound none of us would ever forget, a wet pop that cut through the rain. His ruck pinned him sideways against the slope, one leg dangling over a 15-foot drop into rocks and vines. The patrol froze. Ramirez, our squad leader for the lane, hand-signaled halt in security. I dropped my ruck and scrambled to Kowalski. His face was gray, jaw clenched so tight I thought he'd crack teeth. "Talk to me," I said. "Knee. Can't put weight on it." He tried to stand anyway, collapsed immediately. The pain made him vomit over the side of the trail. Alvarez appeared, because of course he did, stepping out of the brush like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. He assessed in seconds. Possible torn ACL or MCL, no way Kowalski was walking out under his own power. We were still 2 days from the scheduled extract point. This was the line we all knew existed but never wanted to see. The point where training stops being training and becomes a real emergency. Push too hard and you destroy someone. Pull back too soon and you rob the rest of the class of the growth that comes from solving real problems. Alvarez didn't hesitate. He called for the litter build. We cut saplings with machetes, lashed them with 550 cord, used ponchos for the carry surface. 4-man teams rotating every 10 minutes. We turned a 5-day patrol into a 6-day medevac evolution, carrying Kowalski the remaining 18 kilometers over 2 ridges and 1 chest-deep river. It was brutal. The litter bearers fell out from exhaustion. Blisters became open wounds. Rucks got heavier with every step because morale was leaking out of us. A few guys started whispering that we should have called for a helicopter insert. Real world, you'd medevac immediately. But this was JOTC. The point was to force us to solve it with what we had. Kowalski made it out. Surgery confirmed torn meniscus and MCL. He was medically dropped from the course but recovered fully and later deployed twice. That night, after we finally hit the extract point and loaded Kowalski onto the truck, I watched the remaining 23 of us sitting in silence around the rally point. No one celebrated finishing the lane. We were all thinking the same thing. That could have been any of us. And we were starting to understand that the cadre walked a razor's edge every day. Push hard enough to forge us, but not so hard we broke irreparably. For the first time, I saw Alvarez differently. Not as the cold, unflinching ghost, but as the guy who had to make the call on when enough was enough. He'd chosen to let us carry Kowalski out instead of quitting the lane early. Risky, but it taught us more about teamwork, endurance, and leadership than any perfect patrol ever could. That incident cracked something open in me. I stopped seeing the cadre as adversaries trying to fail us. I started seeing them as guardians keeping us just inside the red line, close enough to real danger that we grew, far enough that we survived to use it later. And somewhere in those 6 days of carrying a wounded brother through the mud, I began to understand why someone would voluntarily come back and do this job to others. Because the line between training and destruction is thin, but walking it correctly saves lives long after the jungle is just a memory. It happened on a routine movement that shouldn't have been anything special. Week 4, day 2 of the final field phase. We were exfilling after a successful raid lane. Spirits high for once. 19 of us left, feeling like we might actually earn the patch. The route back to the patrol base was a steep downhill trail through swordgrass and loose volcanic soil, slick from overnight rain. I was assistant patrol leader, walking near the front with Ramirez. We'd just crested the ridge and started the descent when my boot caught an exposed ohia root hidden under leaves. Simple trip. Happens 10 times a day in the jungle. Except this time my full weight came down wrong. My left leg stayed planted while the rest of me twisted forward. I felt the knee hyperextend, then something inside tear with a sensation like a rubber band snapping. Pain exploded. white-hot, nauseating. I went down face first into the mud, ruck driving me deeper. The patrol halted instantly. Ramirez was at my side in seconds. "You good?" I tried to play it off. "I just rolled it. Give me a minute." I stood. The knee buckled immediately. Weight on it was impossible. The joint felt loose, like it wasn't connected anymore. I hopped a few steps on my good leg, sweat pouring, trying to breathe through the pain. No way I was walking the remaining 8 kilometers like this. Alvarez materialized, assessed, and radioed the safety vehicle. Diagnosis in the field? Likely ACL tear, possible meniscus damage. I was done. Medical drop. Course over. They loaded me onto a litter for the carry to the nearest logging road where a Humvee could reach us. As 4 of my classmates hoisted me up, I felt the shame hit harder than the injury. Kowalski had torn his knee weeks earlier, and we'd carried him out as a team evolution. This was just me being clumsy. No heroic story, just a stupid fall on a trail we'd walked a dozen times. The ride back to the training complex was quiet. I stared out the window at the jungle sliding past, a patch of green I'd fought so hard to earn, now slipping away because my body had failed me. The medics at Tripler Army Hospital confirmed it later. Complete ACL rupture, partial meniscus tear. Surgery required. 6 to 9 months recovery. No graduation. No jungle expert tab. Lying in the barracks that night, alone while the rest of the class was still out in the field, I understood what real defeat felt like. Not quitting. Worse, being forcibly removed when you still had fight left in you. The knee would heal. The failure wouldn't. I'd come so close, survived everything the jungle threw at me, only to be taken out by one root on a downhill slope. I didn't cry. I just stared at the ceiling and replayed the moment over and over, wondering if there was anything I could have done differently. The answer was no. Sometimes the body breaks before the will does. And for the first time, I hated the jungle, not for being hard, but for being indifferent.
They carried me out on the litter to the logging road, loaded me into the Humvee, and just like that, I was gone. The jungle swallowed the patrol again as the vehicle pulled away. 19 silhouettes disappearing into the green, moving on without me. Back at Schofield Barracks, the rear detachment NCO put me in a temporary billet with the other drops and holds, guys waiting for surgery, profiles, or reassignment. Most of them were from different courses or units, strangers with their own stories of failure. We nodded at each other in the chow hall, but nobody really talked. There was an unspoken rule: don't ask why someone's here. I watched the days tick by on the wall calendar while my knee swelled and throbbed under ice packs. The rest of my class was still out there, finishing the long patrol, the night ambushes, the final 40-kilometer ruck to the graduation point. I knew their schedule by heart. While they were low-crawling through razor grass at 02 a.m., I was hobbling to the microwave for midnight ramen. While they were eating cold MREs under poncho hooches, I was in the DFAC choosing between Salisbury steak and grilled chicken. Every time I scrolled through my phone and saw a Tropic Lightning Unit post, some generic training in paradise photo with soldiers in the background, I scanned the faces, looking for Ramirez, Park, or even Hayes. I never spotted them, but I knew they were still in it, moving forward, earning it. The self-loathing was constant. I told myself it was just bad luck, a route, a slip. Anyone could have gone down the same way, but that didn't stop the voice in my head. You weren't strong enough. Your body quit on you. You didn't deserve to finish anyway. I felt like a fraud wearing the unit patch. Guys in the barracks would ask, "You coming from JOTC?" And I'd mumble something about an injury. They'd nod sympathetically, but I could feel the unspoken judgment. Another one who couldn't hack it. The isolation was the worst part. For weeks in the jungle, everything hurt, but at least we all hurt together. Misery was shared currency. Now I was alone with mine. No more inside jokes about how bad Menu 4 MREs tasted. No more quiet talks under the poncho hooch at night. Just me, a swollen knee, and the knowledge that the people I'd suffered alongside were still suffering and growing without me.
I stopped checking the group chat the class had made. The messages were all encouragement, mission updates, countdowns to graduation. I couldn't stand reading them. One night, about 2 weeks after the injury, I crutched my way to the PX, bought a six-pack, and sat on the barracks steps drinking alone. A sergeant from another company walked by, saw the crutches and the temporary profile bracelet, and said, "Jungle school?" "Yeah." "Rough course. You'll get it next time." I nodded, but inside I was screaming, there might not be a next time, and even if there is, I'll always know I failed this one. Being left behind didn't just hurt my knee, it hurt my identity. I'd started to believe I was becoming something tougher, something real. Then the jungle reached out with one root and reminded me I was still fragile. The shame wasn't loud. It was quiet, constant, corrosive. And it followed me all the way to surgery, through months of physical therapy and into whatever came next. Because no matter how many times people told me it wasn't my fault, part of me knew the truth. The patrol moved on. The course went forward. The jungle didn't wait. And I got left behind.
I was 3 months post-surgery, grinding through physical therapy at the Schofield Soldier Recovery Unit. The knee was stabilizing, could run short distances without the brace, could ruck light loads again, but the mental damage lingered. I'd been recycled into a regular line company in the 25th, doing staff duty and motor pool crap while waiting for clearance to try JOTC again. Most days I felt like a has-been who never really was. One Thursday afternoon, I was limping across the quad when I heard that familiar calm voice behind me. "Private, hold up." I turned. Staff Sergeant Alvarez, still in jungle fatigues, apparently in from the East Range for a meeting. He looked exactly the same, lean, unreadable, like the rainforest had preserved him. We walked to a bench under a monkey pod tree. Small talk first. How the knee felt, how PT was going, how the unit was treating me. Then he cut to it. "Why haven't you put in a packet to recycle?" I shrugged. "Didn't think I'd get approved. And honestly, Sergeant, I'm not sure I want to go back. I failed once. What if I just break again?" He let the silence sit for a long minute, staring at the mountains in the distance. "You didn't fail. The course failed you. We design it to push bodies to the limit. Sometimes the limit shows up before graduation day. That's not weakness, that's physics." I didn't know what to say. No one had framed it like that before. He kept going. "I've seen guys ring the bell on day 2 who later became damn good soldiers. I've seen graduates wash out in combat because they never learned humility. The patch doesn't make the man. What you do after the setback does." Then he asked the question that hit hardest. "Do you think the jungle owes you anything?" "No, Sergeant." "Good, because it doesn't. It never did. But you still have a choice. Let one route define you, or go back and finish the conversation." I laughed, bitter. "Easy for you to say. You're cadre. You never got carried out." He looked at me for a long second, then rolled up his left sleeve. There was a long, faded surgical scar running from mid-bicep to elbow. "Panama, 89. Compound fracture on a night jump. Evac'd out of the operational area. Missed the big fight everyone talks about. Spent 6 months in a cast wondering if I was done. I wasn't cadre then. I was a scared specialist who thought his career was over." I stared at the scar. Alvarez, the ghost, had been broken and carried out too. He rolled the sleeve back down. "Difference was, I went back to airborne school the minute they cleared me. Not because I had something to prove to anyone else, because I had something to prove to the guy in the mirror who thought one bad landing meant he wasn't cut out for this life." He stood up. "Packets due next week for the April cycle. If you want a slot, I'll sign the recommendation. If you don't, that's fine too. But don't make the decision out of shame. Make it out of truth." He started to walk away, then paused. "One more thing. The jungle doesn't remember who quit and who graduated. It only remembers who came back." I sat there a long time after he left. The seed he planted wasn't some rah-rah motivation. It was quieter, deeper, the realization that real resilience isn't never falling.
It's deciding the fall doesn't get the last word. 2 days later, I submitted the packet. Alvarez signed it the same day. And for the first time since the injury, I felt something shift. Not confidence exactly, but possibility. The jungle hadn't finished with me yet. Neither had I.
April cycle. 8 months after the injury. I stepped off the bus at the East Range Training Complex for the second time. Same gravel square, same wet earth smell, same cadre waiting with crossed arms. But everything felt different. My knee was cleared for full duty, but it still ached on the cold mornings and clicked when I went downstairs. The scar was a thick pink line. I had a slight limp when I was tired. Physically, I wasn't the same kid who'd shown up the first time. Mentally, I was starting from somewhere below zero, carrying the weight of knowing exactly how bad this could get. The new class had 30 fresh faces. I knew none of them. Ramirez, Park, and the others from my original cycle had graduated, gotten their tabs, moved on to units or deployments. I was the only recycle. That made me both an anomaly and a ghost story, the guy who'd blown his knee and come crawling back. The cadre treated me differently too. Alvarez was still lead instructor. He gave me a nod on day 1, no speech, no special treatment, but I caught him watching me closer during the first ruck, testing whether the leg would hold. It didn't at first. The old blisters reopened, the knee swelled after the first long movement. I fell out of a patrol on day 3. Not dramatically, just couldn't keep pace on a steep climb. The humiliation was fresh, like the jungle was laughing at me for thinking I could rewrite the ending. But this time, I recovered faster. I taped the knee religiously, iced it at every halt, stretched like my life depended on it. I didn't try to prove I was tougher than before, I just tried to be smarter. The big shift was in how I watched everything. Having been through most of the course once, I could see the purpose behind every evolution. Gear inspections weren't busy work. They prevented chafing and lost equipment. Water discipline wasn't sadism. It kept you functional on the back half of the patrol. I stopped fighting the system and started studying it. I also kept my mouth shut. No complaining, no stories about last cycle. The new guys didn't need to hear how I'd almost made it before. They had their own suffering to do. Slowly, the body adapted again. The limp faded. Calluses thickened. The ruck felt normal instead of punitive. I wasn't the fastest or the strongest. There was a kid from the 82nd who smoked everyone on the hills, but I was steady. I didn't fall out again. More important, I started to trust the process instead of resenting it. Recovery wasn't about erasing the injury. It was about building around the weak spot until it wasn't the defining factor anymore. By the end of week 2, I wasn't the recycle anymore. I was just another student grinding through the mud. And for the first time since the tear, I felt like I belonged in the file. Not ahead, not behind, just in it. Coming back from -0 didn't mean becoming superhuman. It meant accepting that I was damaged goods and deciding to function anyway. The jungle didn't care about my scar. It only cared if I could still move through it. And day by day, I proved I could.
Week 3 of my recycle cycle, we were deep into small unit patrols, 4 to 6 man teams rotating leadership roles every lane. The cadre wanted to see who could think under fatigue, who froze, who adapted. My turn came on a night ambush setup followed by a dawn break contact and exfil. 5 of us, me as patrol leader, a quiet corporal from the 101st named Vargas as point, 2 PFCs fresh out of OSET, and a specialist named Lee who'd been a Boy Scout leader back home and knew knots better than anyone. The objective was simple on paper. Move 6 kilometers through triple canopy to an overlook, set up a hasty ambush on a trail intersection, simulate the kill zone with blanks, then withdraw under pressure to a rally point. But nothing is simple in the Koilau at night. We stepped off at 2200. Rain had stopped for once, but the ground was saturated, every step a soft suck of mud. I'd studied the pace count and azimuths until I could recite them backward. Still, my stomach was in knots. Leading meant every decision was mine. One wrong turn and we'd miss the sight. One noise and the enemy cadre would light us up early. The first failure came quick. Halfway to the objective, Vargas signaled halt. He'd lost the trail in a tangle of howbush. I moved up, checked the map with a red lens, tried to shoot an azimuth to a terrain feature. Cloud cover killed the stars. No GPS allowed in training. We were navigating old school, pace, compass, and feel. I guessed wrong. We veered 30 degrees left and ended up in a gulch full of wait-a-minute vines that shredded our uniforms and skin. By the time I realized the mistake and corrected, we'd lost 40 minutes and everyone was bleeding from scratches. The PFCs started whispering, loud enough for me to hear frustration. Lee just watched me, waiting to see how I'd handle it. I could have pushed harder, tried to make up time. Instead, I halted the team, redistributed some weight from the slower guys, and admitted it out loud. My screw-up on the azimuth. We're adjusting now. Stay tight. That honesty steadied them more than bravado would have. We reached the ambush site just before first light, late but intact. Set up the claymores, blanks, assigned sectors, camouflaged. When the enemy patrol walked into the kill zone at dawn, we executed perfectly. Initiated clean, shifted fire, broke contact like clockwork. The exfil was where real leadership got tested. The cadre threw artillery simulators and roaming pursuers at us. We had to cross a knee-deep stream twice, climb a near-vertical ridge, and maintain cohesion while evading. One of the PFCs, kid named Torres, started cramping badly after the second river crossing. Could barely walk. We had two choices: slow the whole team and risk getting caught, or figure something else out. I remembered Kowalski's litter carry from my first cycle. We didn't need a full litter, but we could help. I had Vargas and Lee rig a quick support, arms linked under Torres's ruck to take weight off his legs. I took point and slowed the pace just enough. We rotated the carry every 5 minutes. We made the rally point with 10 minutes to spare. Exhausted, cut up, soaked, but together. Alvarez was waiting at the AAR. He didn't praise the ambush. It was textbook. He focused on the exfil. How we'd corrected the navigation error without panic, how we'd refused to leave Torres behind even when speed mattered. Then he looked straight at me and said, "Solid leadership on the correction and the carry. You didn't try to be perfect, you just kept the team functional." It was the first time a cadre had called something I did solid, not flashy, not heroic, just functional. In the jungle, that's the highest compliment. That lane taught me leadership isn't about never failing. It's about failing early, owning it fast, and fixing it without fracturing the team. I wasn't the best navigator or the strongest carrier, but for the first time I felt like a real part of the line, not just surviving the course, but helping others do the same. And that felt like the first real step towards becoming something more than a private who refused to quit.
Final phase, leadership cycle. My team of 5 drew the overnight security halt after a long raid lane. We'd moved 15 kilometers that day, hit the objective clean, and withdrawn to a dense patch of koa and oia deep in a valley no trail map bothered to name. The cadre dropped us off with a grid, a no-comm window, and one instruction: hold this position until 06 pickup, maintain 100% security, no sleep. We set up a cigar-shaped perimeter in a small clearing barely big enough for our rucks. 2-man fighting positions, overlapping sectors, trip flares on the approaches, claymores out front, blanks but wired real. I took the first watch with Vargas. The others tried to grab quick naps under poncho hooches. The jungle went dark fast. Canopy swallowed the last light by 1830. No moon, just layers of black broken by the faint glow of our red lens headlamps when we checked gear. Rain started soft, then steady, drumming on leaves overhead like distant small arms fire. That's when the real fear showed up, not the adrenaline kind from an ambush lane, but the slow, creeping kind that lives in silence. First it was the sounds. Feral pigs rooting somewhere close, crashing through brush, grunting, sounding exactly like a human patrol trying to be quiet and failing. Every snap of a twig made us freeze, weapons up, safeties clicked off. Vargas whispered, "You hear that?" I nodded. We waited. Nothing came, just pigs, but the heart rate stayed elevated. Then the waiting set in, hours of it.
You can't talk above a whisper on security. You can't move much. You sit in the mud, wet uniform clinging cold, listening to your own pulse and the endless drip from leaves. Thoughts you keep buried in daylight start crawling out. I thought about the knee, how one wrong step in the dark could end everything again. I thought about the guys who'd quit or been dropped, wondering if they were sleeping dry right now and feeling sorry for us or glad they were out. I thought about what would happen if this wasn't training, if the silhouettes moving out there were real and they wanted us dead. Vargas broke the silence once, voice low. "You ever get scared out here for real?" I thought about lying, saying no. Instead, I told the truth. Every night. He nodded like that was the right answer. Around 2 o'clock, Torres, the PFC who'd cramped on my earlier lane, started shaking in his hooch. Not from cold, full-body tremors, quiet sobs he was trying to hide, combat fatigue hitting hard. I crawled over, checked he was okay physically, then just sat with him. Didn't say much, just let him know he wasn't alone in it. By 4 o'clock, the rain stopped, but the quiet got heavier. No birds yet, no wind, just that oppressive jungle stillness that makes you feel watched. I caught myself gripping my rifle tighter than necessary, scanning sectors I'd already cleared 10 times. That night there were no bangs, no yelling cadre, no simulated casualties, just 5 of us in a tiny perimeter holding back the dark and everything it carried. And I realized the deepest fear wasn't dying or getting hurt, it was facing how small you really are out here, how much of survival depends on things you can't control, weather, terrain, luck, other people's discipline. All the training, all the toughness, and still you're just a wet, tired human waiting for dawn. When the sun finally filtered gray through the canopy at 5:30, we were all still awake, still alert, still intact. The pickup truck's engine sound in the distance felt like mercy. Alvarez did the AAR later that morning. He didn't ask about tactics or flare placement. He asked how we handled the night, how we kept each other steady when there was nothing to fight but our own heads. I told him the truth. We just stayed together, watched each other's sectors when one guy started fading, talked quiet when someone needed it, refused to let the dark win. He nodded once. That's the point. The jungle at night with no shots fired is the hardest lane we run because it forces you to face yourself when there's nowhere to hide. That night didn't make us heroes. It just showed us we could sit in the fear and still do the job. And for soldiers, sometimes that's everything.
Graduation day for the Jungle Operations Training Course isn't what civilians imagine. There's no parade field, no band playing, no families pinning anything on your chest. No one claps when you cross a finish line. It just ends. Our final evolution was a 40-kilometer ruck march from the deepest part of the East Range back to the training complex. Full load, no resupply, starting at 02 so we'd hit the gate around noon. 19 of us stepped off in 2 files under headlamps. By kilometer 25, the sun was up, the humidity was crushing, and the knee I'd rebuilt was screaming. No one talked much. We just walked, one boot in front of the other, through valleys and over ridges we'd come to hate and, strangely, respect. We lost 2 more that morning. One guy got severe heat stroke and had to be medevaced by truck. Another simply sat down on the side of the trail at kilometer 32, took off his ruck, and said he was done. No drama. He didn't ring a bell. There wasn't one out there. He just quit quietly, and the cadre marked his name off the roster. 17 of us staggered through the final gate at 13:17. Mud-caked, blistered, uniforms shredded, eyes hollow. The cadre were waiting in a loose semicircle. No smiles, no congratulations. Alvarez stepped forward, looked us over, and said, "Course complete. Clean your weapons, turn in training ammo, and get on the bus." That was it. We sat on our rucks in the gravel while the armorer inspected rifles. No one cheered. A couple guys laughed from sheer exhaustion, the kind of laugh that's half a sob. Vargas handed out the last warm canteen and we passed it around like it was champagne. Someone cracked a lame joke about finally getting to eat hot food. Mostly, we just stared at the ground, processing the fact that it was over. Later that afternoon, back at Schofield, they handed us our certificates and the coveted Jungle Expert tab, a small black and green rectangle with a machete and the word jungle on it. We pinned them on in a classroom with folding chairs. A major gave a short speech about how we were now part of a small fraternity, how the skills would save lives downrange. We applauded, politely, because we were too tired to do anything else. Then we scattered. Some guys had flights home that night. Others reported straight back to their units. I ran into Torres in the PX the next day buying new boots. We nodded, said, "Good job," and went our separate ways. Looking back at the roster later, I counted the names. 30 started my cycle, counting the recycles. 17 finished. The others were gone. Some voluntary, some medical, some performance drops. I thought about the empty bunks, the faces I'd shared poncho hooches with who weren't there at the end. No one talked about them much. The Army just moves on. The emotions were mixed, tangled. Pride, yes, I'd come back from the injury and finished what I started. Relief that the suffering was over, but also a quiet grief. The jungle had taken something from all of us, illusions, softness, certainty, and given something back, but not without cost. And there was no victory lap to make it feel clean. We didn't win anything that day. We just survived long enough for the course to let us go. And in the silence after the certificates were handed out, I think we all understood. Graduation wasn't a celebration. It was permission to leave the jungle behind, carrying everything it had carved into us.
6 months after graduation, I got the orders, selected for promotion to sergeant, and a follow-on assignment back to Lightning Academy as cadre for the Jungle Operations Training Course. Same island, same rainforest, same mud. But I wasn't the same guy stepping off the bus this time. I flew in from the mainland on a red-eye, landed at Hickam, and took the familiar drive up the H2 to Schofield. The mountains looked exactly like I remembered, lush, green, indifferent. But where I used to feel dread in my gut, now there was something quieter, recognition. My first day on the job, I walked the East Range alone before the new class arrived. Same gravel square where we'd gotten haircuts, same ridges we'd cursed on ruck marches, same stream crossings that had swallowed boots and pride. I stood on the ridge where Kowalski had gone down in my first cycle, where I'd torn my knee in the second. The jungle hadn't changed. It didn't care that I'd earned the tab or pinned on stripes. It was still waiting to test whoever came next. But I had changed. The kid who'd shown up wide-eyed and cocky was gone. So was the broken private on crutches, convinced one injury defined him. In their place was a sergeant who understood exactly how fragile soldiers are when they arrive and how resilient they can become if you guide them right. I saw it in small things. The way I packed my ruck now, methodical, no wasted space, everything taped down before I even thought about noise. The way I read terrain, not just for navigation, but for what it would do to a tired soldier's mind. The way I could look at a new class lining up for gear issue and already spot the ones who'd struggle with humidity, the ones who'd mouth off, the ones who'd quietly carry extra weight for someone else. Alvarez was still there, promoted to sergeant first class now, running the whole show. He pulled me aside after my in-brief. "You ready for this side of it?" I thought about the question. Ready to put others through the same suffering? Ready to watch some quit, some break, some rise? Ready to walk that thin line again, but this time holding the map? "Yeah, I think I am." He nodded. "Good, because they're not here for easy. They're here because their units need soldiers who can operate when everything's against them. We don't owe them comfort, we owe them competence." That first cycle as cadre, I stood on the same rise where I'd once watched my own class struggle. Now I was the one calling quiet corrections. Slow down, feel the ground. The jungle doesn't reward hurry.
And when I looked at their soaked, mud-smeared faces, I saw my old self staring back, scared, stubborn, unsure. But this time I knew something they didn't yet, that if they stayed one more day, then one more, the jungle would give them back a version of themselves they didn't know existed. Hawaii the second time wasn't paradise or hell anymore. It was just home ground, familiar pain, known tests. From the other side of the ridgeline with sergeant stripes and scars, I finally saw it clearly. The rainforest doesn't change you by being kind or cruel. It changes you by refusing to lie about who you are. And now my job was to stand in it, speak that same unforgiving truth to the next group, and help them become men who could carry it forward. The view was the same. The man looking at it wasn't.
Most people, once they finally escape the mud and the humidity and the endless rain of JOTC, swear they'll never voluntarily go back. They get their tab, tell the stories, and move on to drier assignments. Fort Carson, Fort Drum, anywhere with seasons that aren't just wet and wetter. When I told my buddies in the battalion that I'd put in a packet to come back as cadre, they looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "You've already done it twice, once broken, once whole," one of them said over beers at the Schofield bowling alley. "Why the hell would you sign up to live there again?" I didn't have a clean answer at the time. I told them the standard line, good for promotion points, chance to teach, give back, but that wasn't the real reason. The real reason came to me one night during my first cycle as cadre, standing watch over a new class on their first overnight security halt. I was walking the perimeter, red lens checking positions, when I realized I wasn't anxious anymore. The jungle sounds, the pigs, the dripping leaves, the distant coqui frogs didn't set my pulse racing like they used to. They felt familiar, almost comforting. I'd chosen to come back because the rainforest was the only place that had ever told me the full truth about myself. Out there, with no distractions, no rank insulation yet, no escape, I'd met every version of me. The cocky kid, the complainer, the broken one, the stubborn recycler, the quiet leader who finally figured it out. The jungle stripped away every lie I'd told myself about who I was or wasn't. And once you've seen yourself that clearly, weaknesses, strengths, limits, potential, you don't want to go back to places where it's easy to hide again. I also came back for the soldiers I'd watched disappear, the ones who rang the bell, the ones carried out on litters, the ones who just faded under the weight. I couldn't save them then, but maybe I could help the next group make it through. Maybe my scars, physical and otherwise, could be useful if they kept even one kid from feeling like quitting was the only option. There was selfishness in it too. Teaching in the jungle kept me sharp. It forced me to live the standards I'd finally internalized. I couldn't let myself get soft, get loud, get sloppy, not when I knew exactly how much it cost when cadre failed to model what they demanded. Alvarez asked me the same question during my cadre in-processing. Why volunteer for this? I thought about it longer this time. Because the jungle gave me something I didn't have before. It showed me who I am when everything's taken away. And now I want to stand in the same place and help others find that for themselves, even if they hate me for it. He smiled, the rare kind that actually reached his eyes. That's the right reason. So I came back. Not for the tab, I already had it. Not for the stories, I'd lived them. I came back because the jungle had unfinished business with new soldiers, and I understood the language it spoke better than most. I chose to return because some places break you open once, and after that, you either run from them forever, or you go back to help others survive the opening. Every time I put on the jungle fatigues now, I feel both of them inside me. There's the private, the one who was terrified of the dark, who cried under a poncho hooch, who almost rang the bell, who got carried out on a litter with a blown knee. That kid is still there, raw and exposed, whispering reminders of how quickly everything can fall apart. Then there's the sergeant, the one who stands on the ridgeline calling corrections in a calm voice, who makes soldiers low crawl through mud for a single loose strap, who watches them hit the same walls he once hit and refuses to let them quit too early.
That man feels distant from the kid, almost like a different person wearing the same name tape. They coexist in the same uniform, and most days they're at war. The private wants to go easy sometimes. When I see a new student shaking from exhaustion at 03, face pressed into the mud during a smoke session, the private remembers how that felt and wants to call it off. He wants to say, "It's enough, let them rest." He knows how thin the line is between breaking and breaking through. The sergeant shuts him down. He knows mercy in the moment can become casualty later. He's read the reports from real jungles, soldiers who died because someone let a bad habit slide in training. The sergeant tells the private, "You don't get to make the call based on how you felt. You make it based on what they'll need when it's real." Some nights, after a particularly brutal lane where half the class looks shell-shocked, I sit in the cadre tent cleaning my rifle and feel the private winning. Guilt creeps in. Am I turning into the monster I used to hate? Am I pushing them because it's necessary or because I need to prove something? The ethics of this job are brutal. We deliberately create suffering. We take sleep, food, comfort, pride. We watch grown men cry and do nothing to stop it. We know some will leave scarred in ways that don't show on an X-ray. And we do it anyway. Because the alternative, sending underprepared soldiers into worse places, is unthinkable. Alvarez told me once, over coffee in the cadre hooch, "You'll never feel clean doing this job. The ones who do are dangerous. The ones who lose sleep over it are the ones I trust." I lose sleep. I replay every call. Did I push that kid with heat exhaustion too far before pulling him? Did I let that sloppy patrol slide when I shouldn't have? Did I miss the signs someone was about to ring the bell? The two men in the uniform argue constantly. The private keeps me human. The sergeant keeps them alive. The only peace I've found is this. I don't have to choose between them. I need both. The private's memory of pain makes me careful. The sergeant's refusal to compromise makes me effective. As long as they keep fighting each other inside me, I know I'm still on the right side of the line. Because the day one of them wins completely is the day I become either too soft to prepare them or too cruel to deserve the trust they put in me. 2 men, 1 uniform. No truce. Just balance.
Cadre life has one unspoken rule. If the class doesn't hate you at least a little, you're not doing your job. They don't teach that in any leadership course. It's something you learn the hard way, cycle after cycle, watching soldiers glare at you across the rally point after you've just smoked them for an hour because one guy forgot to tape his dog tags. I've been called every name under the sun. Quietly, of course, because they know better than to say it to my face. Tyrant, sadist, robot. I've seen the looks when I pull a patch through a dirty bore and send the whole squad back to square one. I've heard the whispers in the tents at night. Sergeant doesn't give a damn about us. They're wrong. I care more than they can imagine. That's why I don't give a damn about being liked. My philosophy is simple, and it's the same one Alvarez passed down. Comfort is the enemy of readiness. If I let them slide on the small things, noise discipline, gear accountability, water conservation, they'll feel good today and die tomorrow. If I let them sleep an extra hour when they're supposed to be on security, they'll think I'm the cool sergeant, and some unit downrange will pay for it when those same soldiers fall asleep on post in a real ambush. So I teach them to hate the standard instead of me. I stay calm, consistent, impossible to satisfy. I don't raise my voice because anger is personal. Corrections are professional. When I make the whole patrol low crawl 300 meters because the point man skylined himself on a ridge, I do it without emotion. Not because I enjoy it, God no, but because the lesson has to stick deeper than resentment. The tightrope is real. Push too far and you break spirits unnecessarily. Go too easy and you send them out half-trained. I've seen both kinds of cadre. The screamers who get off on power burn guys out and create cynics. The soft ones who want to be buddies produce soldiers who think war is fair. I try to walk the middle, demanding without being demeaning, strict without being cruel. I praise quietly when it's earned, a nod, a good correction in the AAR. I correct publicly and immediately when it's not.
And I never forget that every soldier in front of me is someone's kid, someone's spouse, someone's best friend. There are nights I lie awake in the cadre tent listening to the rain and wonder if I got the balance right that day. Did I pull that struggling kid from the lane soon enough? Did I let that cocky one slide when I should have crushed the ego early? The margin is razor thin. But then I remember the letters, few and far between, that come from former students after a deployment. Your bullshit saved my life. We moved through that jungle like we owned it because you never let us get sloppy. I hated you then. I get it now. Those make the hate worth carrying, because in the end, I'd rather they hate me and live than love me and come home in a bag. That's the deal I made when I came back to this ridgeline. Be the villain in their story for a few weeks so they can be the heroes in their own later. The jungle taught me how fragile life is out here. My job is to teach them the same, before it's too late and the lesson is permanent. So I keep walking the line. Calm voice, high standard, no apologies. They can hate me all they want, as long as they stay alive to do it.
Third cycle is cadre. The class lined up on the gravel for first formation. 32 new faces, shaved heads, identical uniforms, same mix of cocky and nervous I'd seen a dozen times before. Then I saw him. Roster number 14, Private First Class Ellis. Mid-20s, lean, Midwest pale, eyes that flicked around too fast like he was waiting for the joke to be on him. Something about the way he stood, shoulders a little rounded, weight on the back foot, hit me like a punch I wasn't ready for. He looked exactly like I had on day one of my first cycle. Same hesitant half smile during the welcome brief, same quick glance at the mountains like he couldn't believe this was real, same way of gripping his ruck straps too tight. It wasn't just resemblance, it was reflection. Throughout the first week, the echoes kept coming. Ellis struggled with the humidity the way I had, face constantly red, breathing shallow on the hills. He was slow with the machete, clumsy on the downhills. During gear layout, he forgot to roll his socks the right way, twice, and took the smoke session without complaint, but I saw the shame in his eyes afterward, the same shame I'd carried. At night, I'd catch him sitting outside the tent, staring at nothing, the way I used to when I was calculating how many days until I could quit without looking like a total failure. He wasn't the weakest in the class. There were louder complainers, worse navigators, bigger discipline problems, but he was the one who mirrored me most, quietly doubting, privately fraying, trying hard to hide both. I found myself watching him closer than the others, not favoritism, the opposite. I was harder on him during inspections, quicker to correct his noise discipline, assigned him to the heaviest loads more often, because I knew exactly where unchecked doubt led. I'd lived it. The class noticed. A couple of the louder students started calling him Sergeant's pet project behind my back, half joke, half resentment. I let it slide. They didn't understand I wasn't picking on him. I was trying to keep the jungle from doing to him what it had almost done to me. By week 2, Ellis was still in it, but barely. Dark circles, slower on patrols, the telltale blank stare that comes right before someone rings the bell. I'd seen it in the mirror once. And for the first time as cadre, I felt the old private inside me stirring, not just remembering, but aching, because Ellis wasn't just a student. He was the version of me that almost didn't make it, and I had no idea what to do with that.
Mid-cycle, week 4, Ellis was hanging by a thread. He'd fallen out of 2 patrols in a row, heat exhaustion the first time, severe blisters the second. Medics cleared him to continue both times, but his pace was dragging the team down. The other students were starting to resent him. I heard the grumbling during chow. Why are we carrying his weight? The cadre team noticed too. In the staff tent that evening, the senior instructors held the usual progress review. Alvarez led it. Ellis, he said, dropping the roster sheet on the table. He's becoming a liability. Slowing lanes, affecting morale. Recommendation is to drop him. Performance. We've got precedent. The other sergeants nodded. It was the unwritten rule. If someone consistently drags the class below standard, you cut them early. Keeps the momentum for the rest, prevents bigger problems later. I'd seen it done before, even supported it on other students. But this time, I couldn't stay quiet.
I disagree, I said. Every head turned. He's not quitting. He's not unsafe. He's just struggling in the exact ways a lot of us did. Give him one more lane. Put him in a support role. Carry the radio, the extra water. Let him contribute without leading pace. If he falls out again, then we drop him. But I think he'll respond. Alvarez studied me for a long second. You're getting personal with this one. He wasn't wrong. Ellis was the mirror I couldn't ignore. Dropping him felt like dropping the old me, the one who needed just one more chance after the injury, one more person to believe the fight was still in him. Yeah, I admit it. Maybe I am. But I also think it's the right call for the soldier, not just the class pace. The room was quiet. Going against the grain as a junior cadre wasn't career smart. Consensus mattered. Standards had to hold. Alvarez finally spoke. One more lane. Support role only. If he impedes the mission again, he's out. No appeal. The next day, I pulled Ellis aside before the patrol brief. You're on radio and extra litter gear this lane. No point, no tail gunner. Just stay in the middle and keep up. One job. Don't quit on yourself today. He looked at me, really looked, and nodded. No excuses, no thanks, just a nod. That lane was a grinder. 18 kilometers, 2 major river crossings, 1 night ambush. Ellis didn't set the pace, but he didn't fall out either. He hauled the PRC 152 the whole way, passed water to the guys who needed it, helped rig the litter when another student rolled an ankle. At the extract point, he was still standing, soaked, bleeding feet, but standing. After action review, Alvarez found me at the gear line. You were right, he said. Kid turned a corner today. Good call. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt relieved, like I'd paid forward something I'd once received without asking. Sometimes the unwritten order is to cut the weak link fast, but sometimes the harder call, the one that risks the cadre's credibility, is to give the struggling one the exact rope he needs, not 1 inch more or less. I went against the grain for Ellis, and in doing it, I finally settled something with the private still living inside my uniform. He'd gotten his second chance once. Now it was time to pass it on.
Ellis made it to graduation. Not dramatically, no last-minute heroic carry, no speech about overcoming odds. He just kept showing up. After that one reprieve lane, he found his rhythm in the middle of the file. Steady pace, reliable on the radio, quick to help with litter carries or water redistribution. He never became the fastest or the loudest, but he stopped being the liability. On the final 40-kilometer ruck, he walked near the back, knee wrapped in an ace bandage from old blisters, ruck leaning forward like everyone else's. When we hit the gate, he crossed with the main body, not first, not last, just in. 17 graduates that cycle, solid number. At the brief ceremony, Alvarez handed out the tabs. When Ellis stepped forward, I caught the look on his face. Not triumph exactly, more like quiet disbelief, like he'd expected the jungle to take him out right up to the end and couldn't quite accept that it hadn't. Afterward, most of the class scattered to the buses or the PX for cold drinks. Ellis lingered by the gear pile, slowly packing his ruck like he didn't want to leave yet. I walked over. "Good work," I said. Simple, no speech. He looked up, eyes clearer than I'd seen them the whole course. "Thanks, Sergeant, for not dropping me." I nodded. "You did the work." He hesitated, then asked, "How do you know I wouldn't quit?" I thought about telling him the whole truth, that he wore my old face, that keeping him in was as much for me as for him. Instead, I gave him the cleaner version. "Because you never stopped moving forward, even when it sucked. That's all it ever takes." He smiled, small, tired, real, and shouldered his ruck. We didn't shake hands or hug. Soldiers don't do that. He just said, "See you downrange, Sergeant," and walked toward the bus. I watched him go and felt something settle. Not closure exactly, more like balance restored. The manuals and cadre guides lay out clear criteria for drops: safety risks, repeated failure to meet standard, negative impact on the class. Ellis had skirted that line. By the book, dropping him early would have been defensible, maybe even correct. But the result we got wasn't in any book. One more soldier earned the tab who might not have otherwise. One less guy carrying the weight of
almost made it, and one cadre who learned that sometimes the right call isn't the one that checks all the administrative boxes. The jungle doesn't follow manuals either. It operates on its own logic. Strip away, test, see what remains. Ellis remained, and in a small way, so did the part of me that once thought one bad break or one slow pace meant you were done. Sometimes the wins aren't the perfect patrols or the record times. They're the quiet ones, a kid who looked like failure crossing the line anyway. The course didn't teach that in any lesson plan, but it happened anyway.
I used to think that was the goal. Take the version of me that finally made it, scarred knee, hard-earned tab, calm voice, and stamp him onto every soldier who came through the course. Make them move like I move now, think like I think, refuse to bend the way I learned not to bend. But cycle after cycle, I've watched it fail when I tried. Some students are built like Ramirez, natural jungle creatures from day one, quiet competence in their bones. Others are like Park, analytical, methodical, turning chaos into checklists. A few are even like Hayes, loud, defiant, needing the edges knocked off the hard way. And then there are the Ellises, quiet doubters who surprise you by simply refusing to disappear. None of them became me. None should. The ones who thrive don't mirror me. They take the pieces that fit and build their own version. Vargas turned into a flawless point man, but with a dry humor I never had. Torres, the kid who cramped on my recycle lane, became a team leader who could motivate without yelling, something I still struggle with. Ellis wrote me a year later from a deployment in the Pacific. He'd led a patrol through a monsoon that flooded their route, kept everyone oriented and healthy, but did it by listening more than commanding. I didn't create copies. I just gave them the space to survive the stripping down process and rebuild on their own foundation. That's been the hardest lesson of this job, letting go of the ego that wants to see mini-me's walking out with the tab. The jungle doesn't produce replicas. It produces survivors, each one different, each one carrying something unique forward. My job isn't to manufacture sergeants like me. It's to make sure that whatever raw material walks in, cocky, quiet, loud, broken, brilliant, walks out stronger in its own shape. I didn't create copies of myself. Thank God for that, because the Army doesn't need more of me. It needs more of them.
In the end, the rainforest doesn't add anything to you. It only takes. It takes your illusions of toughness. It takes your need to be the fastest, the loudest, the one who never complains. It takes your belief that comfort equals safety, that shortcuts don't cost, that quitting is always the worst option. It takes the parts of you that can't survive contact with reality. What's left when you're soaked, blistered, exhausted, staring at a ridge you still have to climb isn't prettier. It's not noble. It's just what's real. The core that was always there, hidden under civilian habits and untested confidence. Some people arrive with less fake to strip away. They move through faster. Others, like me, come layered in denial and have to bleed out every false piece slowly, painfully. But the jungle doesn't judge. It doesn't care where you started or how long it takes. It just keeps applying pressure. Rain, mud, weight, darkness, until everything artificial is gone. And if you stay long enough for the process to finish, what remains is enough. Not perfect, not unbreakable, just real. Enough to lead others. Enough to come back and stand on the same ridge. Enough to look at a new class of wide-eyed soldiers and know exactly what's coming for them. The Hawaiian jungle never made me a hero. It just removed everything that was preventing me from becoming a soldier. And for that, I'll keep returning until my time here is done.
There's one thing I've never told a single class. Not in an AAR, not in a quiet moment after a lane, not even to Ellis when he asked how I knew he'd make it. I never say, I was you. Terrified, weak, ready to quit.
And I'm standing here because someone didn't let me. I don't say it because it would shift the weight. It would make it about my story instead of theirs. It would give them permission to lean on my survival instead of finding their own. So I keep it locked away. I give them the standards, the corrections, the smoke sessions, the quiet nods when they get it right. I give them the jungle, full force. And I let them believe I was born this way, calm, competent, unbreakable. Because the truth would rob them of the hardest earned lesson, that ordinary, scared, doubting people can become the ones who stand on the ridge calling corrections. They need to discover that for themselves, just like I did.